Hello, I'm Alan Metcalfe, and this is Conversations with Conservatives. And I'm filling in today. There's a role reversal here today. I'm doing the interview, and I'm interviewing Professor David Flint. The reason I'm doing this is there's lots happening in politics, and I want to give Professor Flint the opportunity to give us his inside view of what he sees happening both in Australia and the United States. So stick around. This is going to be an interesting show. Are you there, Professor Flint?
I am indeed, and I'm looking forward to this, Alan.
Thank you for talking to me. I'm thrilled to be interviewing you again, sir.
Well, I'm honoured.
Professor Flint, first of all, let's start off with Australian politics. And there's lots happening within the Liberal Party. Tony Abbott's come out of the woodwork and seems to be saying things and getting into a little bit of trouble, I hear, and all sorts of problems at the party level. You attended a conference last week, I think it was, that was all about democracy in the Liberal Party. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Well, it's a problem in all of the Australian, or the major Australian political parties. And this is that they're now under the control of power brokers, small groups of power brokers, and in the case of the New South Wales division of the Liberal Party, also lobbyists. Now, to have lobbyists actually being involved in the selection of candidates is a serious error, because the job of a lobbyist is to open the doors of politicians, so they should hardly be choosing the very same politicians.
So you'd agree with Donald Trump then in America? Donald just come out and said he's going to stop the lobbyists from being involved, the politicians and that. And do you agree with that?
I think he's absolutely right. There should be a Chinese wall between lobbyists and politicians.
Right.
Because I don't say lobbyism is bad, but the lobbyists shouldn't be choosing the politicians, because the politicians will then owe something to the lobbyists.
Obviously, they want to make sure that they get the decisions they're lobbying for.
Yes, exactly. And the lobbyists say they only get paid for access to politicians. At least the New South Wales ones say this. They say they're not paid a success fee. And when I said that to this convention, there was a lot of laughter in the hall, as though they didn't believe that they were paid on success.
So is there is there a backlash at the party level, Professor Flint?
Enormous. There's an enormous backlash. And this came out at the formal annual general meeting, the more recent Saturday, of the Liberal Party, and it's forbidden for members to talk about this on pain of expulsion, but some members do talk about it. And what happened there was that a number of members of Parliament complained about the fact that the Liberal Party is falling in numbers in New South Wales, and even those who are still members were very reluctant to come out and help and donate for the last election, and they were in a very difficult position for the last election.
I loved your little story, sir, if I can intervene. I loved your little story about how a couple of people got set out of the Liberal Party. They were expelled, and but you reckon you haven't been expelled, even though you've been one of the most harshest critics.
That's right. Both Ross Cameron, who was the member for Parramatta, and Charlie Lynn, who was a member of the Legislative Council in New South Wales for many years, both senior members of the Liberal Party, and they'd gone on the 7:30 ABC program in which they had criticised the way in which pre-selections are arranged in New South Wales. I'd done the same thing. They were suspended for 6 months. Nothing happened to me. And I came to the conclusion it was either because the powers thought I was far too important and too powerful, or they thought I was so insignificant it didn't matter what they did, so they didn't do anything. And I fear it may well have been the latter.
Well, you're doing a great job, and I'm sure the ordinary members of the Liberal Party and people in general throughout Australia appreciate the fact that you've got the courage to speak up. Talk about speaking up. I note that your friend Pauline, Senator Hanson, has done remarkably well since she got elected and into Parliament. Something like there's a fivefold increase in support for her and her party across the country.
That's so true, and it's a team of 4. There are 2 senators from Queensland, 1 from New South Wales and 1 from Western Australia. And if you go and Google their maiden speeches, they call them now first speeches because maiden is obviously politically incorrect. If you Google their maiden speeches, you will see they are saying things which we hear all the time from ordinary people across Australia that we never hear in Parliament. For example, Malcolm Roberts, the new senator from Queensland, who himself was heavily involved in coal mining, the managerial level, has a degree in management from the University of Chicago, a very credible person. He slams completely what he regards as the rort of global warming, that man-made carbon dioxide emissions are responsible for climate change. We hardly ever heard that in Parliament. He said it very loudly and clearly. This is something in which we're spending billions of dollars a year. It's made what was the cheapest electricity in the world, probably one of the most expensive. It's destroying industry, and it's making it too expensive for pensioners in the south in the middle of winter to heat their houses. They've got to wear overcoats at night, all because of this deranged view that we from our electricity bills have to subsidize windmills, usually owned by rich foreign corporations, which are put on farms all over the country and are driving the farmers mad. The sheep are giving up producing whatever they're supposed to produce. It's a shocking situation.
Yeah, if you want to see windmills, drive into Palm Springs sometimes. If you want to talk about visual pollution, you got these beautiful Palm Springs and you got these clanking old windmills all over the place, and it's a terrible sight.
Which need fossil fuels to start them off.
Sure.
Which, if the wind's too heavy, stop.
Yeah.
And if there's a breakdown, as in South Australia, they stop and the whole state goes into complete. The state has a blackout going on for a day or more in parts, and industries are ruined. Metal's solidified in the factories, and food is destroyed, and the state is upside down because the South Australian government has this silly idea that they've got have a very high dependence on
our mutual friend Peter Manuel continually keeps me informed about what's happening in South Australia, and he says that the state is in real difficulties as far as the farmers and small business people are concerned.
Well, that's the other thing too. They have this mad policy of not building dams,
right?
Of divesting the water from the land, selling the water off to merchant bankers to speculate on.
Yeah,
and
terrible.
And we're supposed to become the food bowl of Asia.
Yeah, but David, can I hold you there? We got one of those breaks, and I need to stop you. And so we're talking with Professor David Flint. And this is Conversations with Conservatives, and we'll be back in a moment. Stick with us, please.
Well, thank you, General. In any other country or any other division, a man of your qualities would be put to the very top of the ballot paper. General, you encapsulate the problem we have before us. Earlier this year, Ross Cameron and Charlie Lynn were suspended for comments they made on the ABC, almost identical to similar comments I also made on the ABC. They were suspended. Nothing happened to me. Was it because they thought I was so important? Or was it because they thought I was so insignificant it didn't matter? I fear it may well be the latter. This reminds me of 1789. I wasn't there, but of 1789, when an attempt was to disperse the Estates General in Paris, and they went to a nearby tennis court, and they swore the tennis court oaths and became the National Assembly. That's you. Federation in this country was a close-run thing. The process after the Corowa Convention in 1893 led to the process being handed over from the politicians to the people. Had this not happened, we could have turned out to be several countries. But it worked brilliantly, and within less than 5 years, without the internet, without jet aeroplanes, the Constitution was adopted and signed by the Queen in London. Charles Kingston, who was the Premier of South Australia, wanted to argue that in our Australian Constitution, the people should be constantly empowered, not just over changes to the Constitution, but constantly empowered as they are in Switzerland. Alfred Deakin talked him out of this. Alfred Deakin said, well, he explained that the people would choose the politicians, and they'd choose the politicians on merit, and that would solve the problem that Charles Kingston saw. Well, Alfred Deakin didn't anticipate the development of the very tight two-party system, and he didn't anticipate the development of a sinister cabal of power brokers who would move into some parts of the political parties. What we've got now is something terrible, and that is members of Parliament, candidates for the membership in this division, are not necessarily chosen on merit, as you know. They are chosen for their allegiance to a power broker. And that's bad enough, but what is worse? What is worse is when the power broker is a lobbyist. Because as you know, lobbyists provide access to politicians. But I am assured that they are paid for that. I'm assured that they are never paid a success fee. Now, for the purpose of the defamation lawyers, could it be noted that when people laughed, I didn't wink, I didn't smile, and I didn't agree? If anyone can't see any problem in that, a glaring, outrageous problem, a scandal, they ought to enroll in Ethics 101. 3 years ago, Jai Martinkovich and I wrote a book called Give Us Back Our Country. In it, we argue that the answer to this problem, and it's not only in this division, it's also riddled through the Labour Party. The problem is, or can be solved by legislation, providing that in return for the cornucopia of financial and legal privileges that the political parties have rewarded themselves, public funding, exemptions in relation to the Privacy Act, a special status in relation to the Electoral Act, the names of the parties on the ballot papers. In return for that, they should do one thing. They should do the decent Australian thing and democratise their parties, return to what they once were. there's an instructive parallel with something we hold very dear, and that is free enterprise and the competitive markets. They too can be tainted. They too can be corrupted by monopolistic practices. It took the Parliament 73 years to even begin to address that issue. How long will it be before the Parliament addresses the problem of the takeover of the political parties? They'll only do this if there's widespread pressure for change. And the problem is, as you all know, we don't always, present people as not included, we don't always get the best candidates in a pre-selection. And this explains a lot of the decisions which are taken which go against the principles of our party, which wouldn't pass the pub test. The important thing is surely that the party reform. If it is not reformed, the traditional voters will wake up that their brand has been taken over and they'll move away, as many did in July of this year. There's a stark and simple choice. It's between reform or it's between self-destruction. Delay is no alternative because that only covers the indefensible. So I commend the resolution of the Warringah FEC.
Metcalfe here again, and this is Conversations with Conservatives, and today I'm talking with that conservative icon of Australian politics, Professor David Flint. Are you there, Professor Flint?
I am indeed, Alan.
Thank you for talking with us. Thank you for sticking with us. Professor, before the break, we were talking about what's happening in Australian politics, and everybody's watching what's happening with Tony Abbott, and no doubt the Prime Minister is watching more closely than anybody. Can you give us some insight?
I would expect him one day again to be Prime Minister. Mr Turnbull came in. There was a coup against Tony Abbott. There was a lot of plotting against him, which I refer to at the convention as the Great Bedwetting Incident. Turnbull came in, and he seems as leader, as Prime Minister, to be weak and indecisive. And not only in Australia, but all around the world, people recognise Tony Abbott as a strong leader. He's been invited more than once to the United Kingdom, Europe, and the United States to speak, particularly on that matter on which he starred, that is border control, his very strong stand against ISIS. Now, Turnbull made a serious error. He should have made him Minister for Defence. He has two defence ministers who together don't come up to the value that Tony Abbott could give, because he is genuinely and sincerely interested in the defence of Australia. If he'd made him a minister, Tony Abbott, who is a very principled and ethical man, would not have undermined the Prime Minister. He would not have leaked. He would not have done those things which were being done against him. But now, as a backbencher, he's perfectly entitled to speak. He's got views.
And the people want to hear what he's got to say, and it's a big mistake that he's not in the cabinet.
Oh, it's a serious error.
So you must be happy with the result in New South Wales, where the Beard government backed off on the greyhound issue.
Oh, most definitely. That decision to suddenly ban the greyhound industry allegedly because of some misbehavior by a handful of greyhound racers, was completely unjustified.
Right.
You don't destroy an industry. You just don't take an industry away. You don't take away their livelihoods and all they've worked for and their passions.
Sure.
You don't take that away. And if you, for some reason, for some justifiable reason, have to, you don't slip in a provision in the legislation that they cannot go to court and be entitled to the reward of fair compensation. Because
Right.
if there's a special principle which the conservatives and the supporters of Western democracy know
Right.
is a valuable human right, and that is the right to private property.
Sure.
Private property is the very centerpiece
Sure.
of capitalism, and it must be assured. And for a liberal government to take that away, strip people of their private property and not allow them to go to court and get fair and adequate compensation, goes against every principle on which
Sure.
the Liberal Party is built.
So the political parties, the conservatives political parties, and I'm talking now about the Liberal and the National parties, they've really lost touch with the people in many ways, haven't they? Which the greyhound issue, you know, that's clear evidence that they've lost this touch. You talk about the pub test, right? Which
Yes.
obviously is the test of what the ordinary people are talking about in the pubs around Australia. So, you know, is that the way you see it?
Yes, that comes from Alan Jones, and
Oh, that's
he
one
would
of
say-
Jonesy's.
Yes. In
Right.
fact, we attributed that to him in Give Us Back Our Country.
Okay.
And what it essentially says, does it pass the pub test? Would it, if you raise this in the pub, for example, the policy of gender fluidity being taught to 5-year-olds, that they're taught to play the roles of
Sure.
people who are having strange sex lives, and
Sure.
they're taught about penis tucking and breast flattening. No wonder the standards in literacy and numeracy are falling. Now, that just wouldn't pass the pub test. They say, are you insane to want to teach this to children? These things don't pass the pub test. And one of the reasons why these things don't pass the pub test, Alan, is this, and it goes back to what we were saying earlier. It's about the selection of candidates. Candidates
Yeah, it is.
for public office should be chosen on merit.
Yeah.
But they're being chosen because of their loyalty to a power broker,
Right.
or particularly one who's a lobbyist. Now,
Right.
we're getting inferior quality candidates.
Yeah. And this is the strength of Pauline Hanson, isn't it? You know,
Yes.
she's putting together people in her party that pass the pub test, if you like. They're a great cross section of just
they're
ordinary Australians, and if she can maintain this, boy, she's going to shake up the major conservative political parties. Do you agree?
I agree. This was how parliaments once were. When I
Right.
was a boy, for example, the Prime Minister of Australia had been an engine driver, the Labor
Right.
Prime Minister. And they didn't take on airs and graces. They didn't think about all of the privileges and rorts they could have. They went around in buses and walked, and during the war they closed the lodge, the
Sure.
Prime Minister's official residence, and stayed in a hotel where both Chipley and Curtin, as people did in hotels in those days, they shared the bathroom.
Right.
And they were very ordinary Australians, and they didn't think that by becoming a politician they had to live like an aristocrat.
Sure. No, those days are gone, which is sad. David, we're going to have to stop there again, and can you hold on, and let's when we come back, let's talk about US politics. It's fascinating, and we're just about 20 days out from the election.
Yes.
I'm Alan Metcalfe, and I'm talking with David Flint, Professor David Flint, and we're taking a break, but we're going to be back in a moment. Stick with us.
Hello everyone, I'm Paul Higgins, and welcome to Safe Worlds TV, the global marketplace, the world leader in internet TV and semantic search, the home of free enterprise, the level playing field that all the world can use for electronic business. With Safe Worlds TV, every business in every country of the world can now be involved in the world economy. There are no barriers to entry. Even the poorest countries and the smallest businesses can be involved. The system is simple. Every country divides into 12 headline channels. Every channel is a gateway to an unlimited number of related community channels. Every community is a social network and a marketplace to sell products and services. There is no limit to the number of businesses that can be connected into a marketplace. There is no limit to the number of products you can sell. All our channels and marketplaces are designed to keep you entertained and to help you do internet business at a cost that everyone can afford. The amazing semantic technology that underpins Safe Worlds TV allows us to deliver this amazing system to the world. It allows us to accommodate millions of TV channels and marketplaces and to link them together into the global marketplace. The vast global marketplace that we are building is the final piece of the electronic global village. This is the ultimate achievement of the internet. What you see here now is only the tip of the iceberg of semantic services that are coming. Come now and see what we've already got. Choose any country of the world, then select the headline channel that you want to explore. Just point and click and follow the logical tree structure. We think you'll be amazed at what we already have in Safe Worlds TV. When you're ready, click on the button at the bottom of the screen and register to become a user. You can start immediately to create your very own internet TV channel. Enjoy the experience. I'm Paul Higgins for Safe Worlds TV.
Hello, this is Alan Metcalfe, and this is Conversations with Conservatives, and I'm standing in as the interviewer today, talking with Professor David Flint. Are you there, David?
I am indeed.
David, before the break, we were talking about Australian politics. Let's shift gears and go across the pond and talk about what's happening in the United States. It'd have to be the most fascinating election that we've seen in a long time. Would you agree?
I would, and if you read and listen to the mainstream media, you'd think the big issue was these large number of ladies who are coming forward just before the actual election. They were silent beforehand, and they're all saying that.
Oh, that's
Mr.
very
Trump
politically. That's very politically incorrect, David. Don't you realise that that's the most important issue in the world today? The whole world it hangs on this one problem, that men actually like ladies.
and it's ignoring completely the real issue. And the point in the election is which of the two should be the President of the United States, and who is most likely to adopt policies in the interests of the people of the United States and indeed of the West.
We've not heard that argument. You know, that argument has not been discussed. It's all about Donald being a cad, and forget about all those important things like the middle class is being destroyed and the people got no jobs, the world economy has never been in worse shape, and the debt is now the worst in the last how many years? My gosh, it's frightening.
It is indeed. It is indeed. And the big issues which came out in the third debate, but which certainly weren't broadcast, the big issues are, firstly, the filling of the vacancies in the Supreme Court,
Yep.
with Trump giving a list of very solid constitutionalists
Right.
who will interpret the Constitution according to its written provisions.
Right.
And Mrs. Clinton is going to fill the court with left-wing activist judges
Yeah.
who are going to undermine not only the social situation in the United States, but open the borders and do all sorts of things which are contrary to the terms of the written Constitution.
Right.
And then there was taxation and regulation. She's for high taxation. He's for low taxation.
Yep.
He's for deregulation. She's for more regulation.
Right.
And there are a number of issues where they are so different that people have a very clear choice. And whether he may have 15 or 20 years ago allegedly groped a lady, and we can never know whether that really happened, that's not the question. The question is who will make the better president and commander-in-chief.
Yep.
And we certainly know who would make a very bad commander-in-chief by the way she behaved over Benghazi and the support she gave to the current president's encouragement and relaxation of the sanctions against the mullahs in Tehran,
Right.
which will allow them to nuclearize, which will allow them to develop ICBMs, and who will allow them to implement their well-stated policy, which they never hesitate from repeating, and that is death to Israel and death to the United States. Well, that's a very clear choice. If I were an American citizen, and we know there are a large number of non-citizens who
Right.
somehow got onto the rolls, and there are dead people on the rolls, and there are people who are enrolled in more than one state. The situation is, as Trump says, has all the potential of a rigged election, but those who are going to vote have a very clear choice.
As a jurist, David, I'm really interested in what you think about how is the reputation of the FBI going to be restored? I never ever thought I'd see the day when the FBI and the US Justice Department would act in a way that appears to be incredibly politically biased.
Just so, as is Inland Revenue. We know that Inland Revenue was being used
Yeah.
to harass those on the right. And we also know with the FBI that when Mrs. Clinton dealt with official secrets in such a way that they could be easily hacked by the Chinese and the Russians,
Right.
and not only would those secrets be known, the names of agents of the United States would become known
Yes.
to foreign powers. She did that so negligently and clearly against the law, knowing what the law was, and the FBI came to the conclusion that they couldn't, that the prosecution wasn't appropriate because she didn't have the requisite intent.
Sure.
Well, the law
Well, look
doesn't
at
talk about her having intent.
Well, look what happened to poor General David Petraeus, America's
Yes.
greatest, probably modern day general, right? There's probably been no military general in recent history that's achieved what Petraeus achieved, and yet his reputation's been destroyed by...
Oh, yes.
Eh?
Exactly, and there's another general, I forget his name, who's
Right.
also in the same trouble, and who's also going to be sentenced and likely to go to prison.
Right.
When you have a situation where there's a different law for the privileged, namely the Clintons,
Right.
and a law for everybody else, including generals, you have the situation where you have an aristocracy, not only with great wealth, but who have separate legal rights
Yes.
to everybody else, and that is absolutely appalling. And the FBI
So how-
head should be
Keep going. How is
he
it
should be removed.
possible? Is the U.S. situation salvageable? You know, is it possible to, as a jurist yourself, is it
It
possible to restore the people's faith and confidence in these institutions, critical institutions of government.
The serious problem is that if Mrs. Clinton is in and there's a Democrat Congress or a Republican-dominated Congress with the leading Republicans having no stomach to fight for Republican principles and
Right.
to give in, as the present crowd did, with the exception of particularly of Senator Cruz. Most of the senators, the Republican senators, handed over to him
Yeah.
their power of veto over the treaty concerning Iran. You have this appalling situation of Republican senators being elected as Tea Party senators and then reneging completely and giving in to the Obama administration. Now, the situation is retrievable, of course, by the election of the better president, who clearly would be, whatever his faults, Donald Trump. But it also requires a very strong Congress, particularly the Senate, because the Senate has the power of veto in relation to presidential nominations for the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court in the United States, even more than our High Court, has turned into an activist legislator. They've decided, the majority have decided, quite often, that the Constitution means what they want it to mean and not what the founders intended it to mean, not the original intention of the Constitution.
Yeah, so do you see, David, can I ask you, because we're running out of time, do you see the possibility of a Brexit-type result in America?
Most definitely. When you look at some of the polls, Rasmussen, the LA Times, for example, they do indicate something which the other polls are not indicating. And as we know, the polls in the United Kingdom were wrong because people are frightened. We had the same thing in 1999. People are frightened to tell pollsters
Right.
something which has now been declared to be politically incorrect. It's politically incorrect in all circles, all upper class circles in the United States, among celebrities, for example. It's politically incorrect to say you're not going to vote for Mrs. Clinton, as it was politically incorrect here to say we're going to throw the crown out of the Constitution, as it was politically incorrect in the United Kingdom to say that the UK would be better out of the European Union. And people now are wary of telling pollsters that.
Yep.
And I think we may well, I hope we will be, surprised by the result. Now, Donald Trump does have personal flaws. We know that. I mean, for example, what he said about Ted Cruz's father.
Right.
And
on that, I don't want to cut you off because I know you love Ted.
I do.
And I'm a fan of Texas Ted, but we've got to stop. We're run out of time. David, we're going to have you back. I'd love to talk to you further. Let's do it before the U.S. elections, and let's see how Donald goes in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be fascinating. I'm Alan Metcalfe, and this is Conversations with Conservatives. Stick with us, and we'll be back soon with another fascinating discussion